Awesome. Okay. Great. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to start over. I think it was another program I was using to record my screen was the problem. Thank you very much. So, I was just talking about, somebody asked what best programs there are to use. So I'll just start over. Hi everyone, good morning. There. So, let's talk about tools. So there are a few free tools that you can get started using today. I always say that it's about the artist, not the tool. So that means that if you are good at making art or good at making whatever you want to make, it doesn't really matter what tool you use. And so that's great news for most people because that means you could use a free tool and have no problems, right? So if you're one to doing like painting or things like that, there are some great free tools for painting. I specifically love Medibang and Krita. And I wanted to let you all know I actually have a blog post coming out about this tomorrow. So if you go over to my website at GaiusAugustus.com, tomorrow I actually have a blog post all about free tools and cheap tools that you can use to make infographics or paintings or whatever it is you're trying to do. So again, for painting, I really recommend Krita or Medibang. They're great programs. For infographics specifically, if you're looking to do like graphic art, a lot of hard lines, vector drawing, I really recommend Inkscape. It's a great program. It's really, really powerful. The learning curve I've heard is hit or miss, so some people have a lot of trouble with it. They don't find it very intuitive. Other people have no problem. So, give it a try and see if you like it. I personally use Adobe Illustrator, which is far from free. But Inkscape, when I've used Inkscape, I've been able to do everything that I've been able to do in Illustrator. So I would definitely give Inkscape a try if I were you. Now there's also some inexpensive tools for making art, and the best one, the one that I've heard of that has really great reviews, is Affinity Designer and Infinity Photo, and those, I think it's like $50, and it's a one-time thing, and I just hear great things about it, so I would give it a try. I have it on my computer. I haven't tried it yet, but everyone I talk to who's tried it says it's great. So that's Affinity Designer, and they have sales for like 40% off regularly, so I would wait for a sale and then go ahead and grab the whole bundle. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. I'm watching those. For those of you who may not know me, I am a multimedia science communicator. I just finished my PhD in cancer biology, just as in like a month ago. I can't believe it's been a whole month. And I have just been taking commissions and making infographics, illustrations, and animations since then. So I started my art career back in high school, where I went to actually a fine arts high school, and I was actually taught, painting, drawing, that kind of thing. And then I went to film school straight out of high school, where I learned all of these sorts of film and television techniques. But as part of my degree, I had to take fine arts classes as well. So again, life drawing, painting, those kinds of things. So again, if you have any questions about infographics, animation, science art, let me know. So I actually left my art school with a semester to go, and ended up working retail for a while, and then went back to school for science. And I decided to go back to school for chemistry and biology. Ended up getting my degree in what's called integrative studies. It's a um, it's a kind of design your own degree program that allows you to mix and match between degrees to kind of formulate your own degree. And so I graduated with that in 2014 and went straight to grad school. And as I mentioned, I finished my PhD a month ago in cancer biology. And my research focused on um, cancer health disparities. So I studied colorectal cancer in African Americans who have the highest incidence and mortality rates. And I used bioinformatics and biostatistics and a little bit of epidemiology study to try and figure out what mechanisms might be at work in those groups. And about, I don't know, a year and a half before I finished my PhD, I was just talking to someone about how I had this art background and how I was thinking about science communication for after grad school. And this person was like, hey, you should come do some work with me. And so I actually got to work with them creating animations and infographics for the website. And from there, I just got on Twitter and decided, okay, well, it seems like people are interested in this, so I should share this. And I was really surprised by how interested people were. So someone says, I would love to fill my presentations with comics, and I already did one, which was fun, but I'm no good at drawing and sketching, so what do you recommend? So I could tell you what tools I use, but what I would recommend actually is to work on your drawing skills. So I always tell people that it's about the artist, not the tool. So the best artist in the world can use a pencil and pen and ink and come out with really nice art, and a person who is not very good at art can use the best tool in the world. Now, the great thing about filling your presentation with comics is that they don't have to be complex. They don't have to be masterpieces, right? So, if, what's that comic everyone likes, XCKD? It's just stick figures, and people love that comic, and by no stretch of the imagination is the art masterpiece level, but the artist is able to get across really, really complex ideas in a very simple manner. If you want to get better at art, there are lots of online things. The Skillshare is a really good place. I'm also going to start doing more tutorials about drawing on my website to help people to find ways to make art in more simple ways. So not necessarily having to go out and get a fine arts degree, but just simple suggestions and tips for people who are just starting out in art. So if you're interested in that, you can go over to my website, GaiusAugustus.com. I haven't focused a lot of attention yet on drawing, but I want to do more of that in the future. I also do offer training and one-on-one consulting. So if there's something you'd want to do one-on-one, I'm happy to help you out. Hi, ACS student chapter. Which ACS student chapter? Is this the whole national one? But as far as tools are concerned, I mentioned earlier some free tools that you can draw with. Inkscape is a good one for vector drawing. For more painterly drawing, Krita and Medibang are great tools. So all of the drawing that I do, Syed Alice asked, would you recommend one of those pads for digital drawing? So those pads are called graphic tablets, And I used to use one all the time. When I was in high school and I was still learning how to draw, I thought, oh yeah, I need one of those. Nowadays, 90% of the drawing I do with a mouse. So if you've seen my infographics, if you've seen my animations, those are all done with a mouse. I'm not using a fancy tablet. I have one from Huion that's one of those like draw on the screen tablets, not one where you're drawing and you see it happen on the screen, but one where the actual screen is the one you draw on. And I use it every once in a while. Luckily, my partner is an artist as well, so they actually use it all the time. Thank you for all the hearts. But I use a mouse for 90% of my art. So if you're thinking about going and spending $1,000 on a graphics tablet just because you think it'll help your art, I wouldn't. I would just focus some attention on learning tools that you can use with the mouse. And for that, I really recommend like Inkscape. Or if you really want to spend some money, Affinity Designer I've heard is very good. And if you want to spend even more money, Adobe Illustrator or the Adobe package is fantastic. That's what I use. So again, the question was, would I use one of the graphical tablets where you can draw like you're drawing on paper and see it on the screen, or draw straight on the screen? I wouldn't spend the money on it unless you really want to do professional drawing, because I know a lot of people who think that that's going to make their art better, but if you're already good at drawing on paper, then it's probably good to just transition into digital drawing, although there's still a learning curve there. But yeah, I think that people sensationalize the drawing tablets a lot. I first started drawing online on Oakaki boards. They're these boards where you have like an online canvas and you draw, and then it's like a forum, so everyone posts their drawings and you could get feedback from people about your art. And when I started on there, I was drawing with a mouse, and later on I got a graphics tablet, and my art didn't get any better because I wasn't improving my artistic skill. I was just using a different tool. So again, to everyone who has joined, welcome. I'm happy to answer questions about drawing, about science art, about infographics, animation, all sorts of things like that. So by far, the most common question I get is what tools to use. And actually, even when I'm talking to people about traditional art, people ask the same question. They ask, what tools should I use? So the way my art process works, I'll just kind of go through it real quick. Typically, I will draw a sketch first, right? We always start with sketches. And I usually either use pencil and paper, or I will use just my mouse to draw a really ugly sketch on my computer, and then I start drawing with a mouse as soon as I can. So I can show you some of my sketches if you'd be interested. They're absolutely horrible. So I'm just going to open Illustrator. Literature on good infographics. Somebody just asked me, do you recommend any literature on good infographics? You know, I'm making a lot of good tutorials, I'll say. I'm not going to call it literature. I'm making a lot of good tutorials on what a good infographic looks like. One of the things that I will say is that typically infographics are thought of as having two things, right? They're thought of having a lot of information, and and then they thought of having a lot of graphics. But typically, when I see infographics, people are way more heavy on the information part than they are on the graphics part. And so one of the things I try and do when I make infographics is I try to think about the graphic side of things. I want people to see my infographics, and I always say I want people within a couple seconds to know a general idea of what that infographic is about. So if I'm doing an infographic on asthma, I show lungs. And if I'm doing infographics on conservation, I show an actual picture of the species that the study was done on. And I find that a lot of infographics online tend to kind of overstep the info part, and they don't think really about the graphics part. But that being said, to me, every infographic has a title. The title is something that people can read very quickly and get an idea of exactly what that infographic is going to teach them or tell them about. And then the next thing is the background information. So what does somebody need to know in order to get through your infographic? Just like in a scientific paper, you need background information. In an infographic, you need that too. So it's usually just a sentence or two. You don't want too much, but just enough so that you can really you're kind of defining terms and telling people what the status quo is. And then the most important part, I think, is to make sure you know what the point is. To me, every infographic should have one main point to it. So if you have lots of different points to get across, you should make multiple infographics. There's nothing wrong with that. But really, you need to think, what is the main thing I want to get across in this infographic, and make sure that everything leads up to that. So what I always say is that the main point is the end of your story, and the background information is the beginning of your story. And so everything else that goes into your infographic is the content, and it should lead people from the beginning of your story, the background, to the end of your story, which is the main point. And again, I have this all laid out on my website in a set of tutorials, or a set of blog posts. I also do a workshop where I actually walk you through the steps and give you exercises to help you to kind of brainstorm how to do it. I give one-on-one feedback. And there are a lot of online resources for making infographics. And so I don't really have any exact tips, because there's so many different methods for making infographics. There's also the Spark program that's really interesting about making graphics to support your science, and that's really interesting program that I was lucky enough to do. But one of the things that I love about the method that I use is that I think that just because you're not an artist doesn't mean you can't make pretty things. And so I don't focus so much on saying use simple representations and things like that, or storytelling, because I think there are a lot of really good resources out there. If you are a member of the Massive Science Consortium, they have a great tutorial on storytelling. ALDA Institute now, or whatever he's calling his program, is a great storytelling. And then the first person I heard it from was, what was his name? He was a scientist who went into, a marine biologist who went into science communication, making films on conservation. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name right now. I always forget his name. But he's made some really good books and talks that he's done on communicating science and storytelling. And I'm a huge storyteller. I mean, I started out in film and television, so I think that that's really the place to think about any infographics, is always think of it as a story. But outside of that, I think one of the best things about my method is it doesn't assume that you can't do the art. It doesn't assume that you need to oversimplify things. I think any level of artist, from the most basic artist to the most professional, could go to my site, look at my tutorials, and learn to make infographics. Actually, in my workshop last time, I had a scientific illustrator join in, and she said it was extremely informative. And this is a professional artist, makes much better art than I do from looking at her stuff. Our stuff is just absolutely amazing. But I was able to help her with infographics. And then I have people who've never drawn a day in their life outside of, sketching for fun, or, kindergarten, things like that. And they were able to get a lot out of it as well and made great infographics. So I really encourage you to go to my website, GaiusAugustus.com. If you go to my Instagram profile, Process of Inquiry, you can get to my website from there, and I've got lots of tutorials. I hate it because I don't like to just say, oh, my literature. I don't want to call it literature, but my tutorials are the way to go. But I started making them because I didn't see great resources online that I thought did justice to the topic the way that I think that it should be made justice to. So hi to everyone who has joined. Feel free to ask questions. I am a multimedia science communicator. I specialize in making infographics, making animations, illustrations. I do graphical abstracts, and I don't talk this much this often, so already my voice is like kind of cracking because I don't usually talk this long at once. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Looks like quite a few people have joined in, and I hope that you've already gotten some good information. By far, the question I get asked most often, no matter where I go, is what tools to use, which I've answered. But I want to just remind you that it's not about the tools, it's about the skills. So go out, learn some basic art skills. If you have questions or want specific tutorials, feel free to go to my website. Feel free to give me suggestions about what... sorry if that interrupted anything. You can feel free to go to my website and tell me what type of tutorials you would like, and I'm happy to make them. So do you think the art part made you a better science communicator, or the other way around? Did your science work make you a better artist? And that's a really great question. I definitely think both ways. I think that art made me better at science, and I think science made me better at art. But it's not because I think that every artist should have a science artist should have a science background, or every scientist should have an artist background. I think that we all have individual experiences that make us powerful investigators or powerful artists. And I think you should never think that an experience that you went through was a waste of time or doesn't add to you and your value as an artist or a scientist or whatever you are. So if you have background experience doing something unique that no one's done, or if you've been through some experience that, no matter how bad or good it was, is very unique, those experiences make you a better artist or a better scientist or a better whatever you are. Now that's kind of a hand-wavy answer, so let me just give you more specifics. Why do I think that being an artist made me a better scientist? I feel like scientists, by and large, I get told all the time, like, oh, how did you switch from science to art, from art to science? Those things are so different. And to me, they're not different. They're both thinking creatively about problems and how to solve them. So I think the best scientists out there are those that are very creative. And being creative doesn't mean you're thinking of things that don't exist. Being creative means thinking outside the box and coming up with solutions to problems that no one's thought of before. So, in that sense, most scientists are creative, and so in that sense, most scientists are in some way some kind of artist, a creative thinker. Now, why do I think science makes me a better artist? So, science taught me that the details matter. When I started doing art, one of the frustrating things that I had was I always wanted things to be perfect, but I didn't necessarily want to spend the time making things perfect. And in science, you have to work hard to perfect things, but you start to learn the details matter, but only particular details matter. So we go to undergrad and we take 4 to 5 years worth of science classes plus electives, and at the end of that, if you go on to do a PhD, most of what you learned isn't applicable every day, right? Like, you learn things and sometimes something might become applicable later on, but you start to figure out, okay, what are the details that are important that I need to figure out? And that really helped me in art, because when I started doing science art, again, I don't do like natural art where it's like trying to make things rendered perfectly. I do a lot of graphic art, and part of graphic art is deciding what's important. If you're drawing a lung, is the exact anatomy important, or is a general shape important? Is the internal structure important? And depending on why you're drawing that piece, the answer to those questions is different. And so it really taught me to think about art in a systematic way, to create my own style, which I had struggled really hard with when I was trying to be an artist. So I also think that if you have a background in science, you don't make up as much. So when I go to make commissions for the scientists that I make commissions for, it's much easier for me to go read their journal article that I'm making a graphical abstract for and understand it, even with all the technical language. Science taught me how to ask questions, so I know how to, and not just asking questions in person, but asking questions online. So I know what to search for most of the time to figure out what a certain scientific question is asking, because I know the search terms, just because that's the background information that you learn. Again, I don't think every science artist needs that, but I think that it definitely helped me to make art faster for my clients, without having to ask as many questions about their science, as well as I know what's important by reading their articles and talking to them. And so when I do ask questions, I think that I'm asking more relevant questions about making sure the science is correct than perhaps people who are especially new to science art are doing. So I hope that makes some sense. I hope I gave you some wishy-washy, feel-good answers, which I totally believe, but also some concrete answers that can help. So to anyone who has recently joined, if you don't know who I am already, I am Gaius Augustus. I make infographics, animations, and other science art, and you can find me at Process of Inquiry, spelled Queer. No worries, I'm glad that it was interesting. Again, I don't usually talk this much, so I'm glad that it was helpful. So on Instagram, I'm Process of Inquiry. On Twitter, which is where I post the most, I'm Gaius Filius. And you can get to all of that from my Instagram profile, as well as my website, GaiusAugustus.com. So in between questions, I thought that I would show you just a couple of my sketches. So I'm going to just quickly flip my camera around. Alright, so here is an early sketch that I did for an infographic, and I drew this because I just wanted to draw the actual animal, but everything else, so you see this like curvy part behind it, everything else is the sketch. And so you see it's not really super well drawn. I use simple shapes to just kind of get the idea across. And then let me see if I can pull up the final. And so here's the final infographic. And so you can see it's much, much different but than the sketch. But the idea is just that the sketch gets across the most basic point. And really the point of the sketch for me is to get the scientist on the same page as me visually, so that we both know I'm going in the right direction. So I'm just going to pull up the sketch again. So that you can see it. So not only did the text change, but even the figure that I decided to use, decided to redraw the African wild dog. And again, this black and white sketch behind, that was actually my initial sketch. So I don't know if you can see, these are like the legs, and this is the body. It's just like a couple of circles and some squiggles. And that's enough to get started, and you can always use references to get across your figures better. But comparing that to the final, you can see that some things stayed about the same. The general structure stayed the same because I had done several sketches before this. This was my final, quote-unquote, final sketch, the one that I'm going to take into Illustrator and create the final product out of. So you can see that I knew that I needed these different areas of text. I knew I wanted the sun and moon, and I knew that I wanted like a temperature, a thermometer over here, and I wanted to mirror the sun and moon again here, and that I wanted kind of the African plains, but have this kind of den area that the wild dogs live in, or den in. And then I didn't even draw any of the babies in this version. And then again, here's my final, where I still have the sun and moon. I have here, you can see that I kind of did a fade so you could tell it's daytime to nighttime. I kept the thermometer, and I even drew the little babies, and then used I totally redrew the African wild dog mother for this. So I hope that gives you an idea of what sketching looks like to me, and the idea that you don't have to make everything perfect first thing. Even some of the best artists I know, their first draft is not good. So there's that. So I hope that helps a little bit with understanding the kind of limitations to a sketch, and the fact that you don't have to make a perfect drawing the first time. So what I tend to do is refine over and over again. So I drew that wild dog first, and then I ended up using that wild dog in a different infographic for the same person, but I decided to redraw that one. And so even, the types of things that you decide to use for any given infographic don't matter. So if you have any questions, I have about 20 more minutes. So we've got plenty of time for a couple more questions if anyone has them. Sorry, give me 1 minute. It is allergy season here. I assume it's allergy season everywhere, but I don't know anymore. When I lived in Georgia, it was always allergy season. And so living in Tucson, we only get a few months, which is great. So I figured I also would talk a little bit about animation. I know a lot of people really like hearing about infographics. I love making infographics. But the best resources I can give you for infographics outside of what I've already said, again, are my website, GaiusAugustus.com. And I want to talk a little bit about animation because a lot of people think animation is just like way outside of what they can do. And again, I'm the type of person who likes to believe that most people can do, if you can learn, you can learn to do animation. And again, any level of art skill. So the first thing that I usually tell people who are interested in doing animations to do is to start with the flipbook style. So when I was a kid, we would draw flipbooks in our notebooks on the edges of pages, so that when you flipped all the pages, it would have some kind of little animation, and we would just do like stick figures or whatever, right? And just do that, and then take pictures with your phone, and then you can go online and make an animated GIF of that. And you can do the same thing where you draw the same thing and you just move it around. So you can take like a drawing of a person and you can just move it around on the camera or on the computer and create an animation that way. So I really think that people underestimate the power of just a little animated GIF that's super simple. And again, there are tons of free GIF makers online. Whenever I need to make one and I don't feel like using whatever tool I'm using, I literally just go to Google and I search animated GIF maker and I upload the images and then it makes the GIF for me. So you could do animation. Any of you could do animation, and even if it's an animated GIF, I would never say just an animated GIF because I love making GIFs. I've been meaning to make a bunch for social media that don't exist, just to have them, but get around to it when I get around to it. As far as animation tools, if you want to do something more professional, there are some free tools. There's a 3D animation tool called Blender. I've used it a little bit. I've mostly watched other people use it. And I actually think the learning curve is a bit high, but it's not incredibly complex to make something simple. So if you want to do something simple starting out, I think it's an okay place to start. I use the Adobe suite just because I had free access to it during my PhD. And so I use After Effects for my animation. And so I do my drawing in Illustrator. And then I take my drawing over to After Effects. So that's where I do all of my animation, and I really haven't found anything that I like quite as much. But most of the animation style that I do is motion graphics, as opposed to like 2D or 3D animation. So if you're interested in doing that style, there are some other tools that you can use. The best tools that I've found for animating outside of After Effects, there's a program called Cinema 4D that's been around a really long time. They used to be called something else, I think. And that tool is for more like you draw every frame. So it works just like a flip book, right? You can use the mouse, just like I was talking about earlier, and draw little sketches and animate them like a flip book. And then Unity, actually, which is a game engine, has a lot of 2D animation tools in it. And I think that going forward is going to be a really interesting tool that I can't wait to see how people utilize to do animation. Because I think because if you can animate in it, then you can just go straight to making games in it. So I think that's powerful, because right now when I make games in Unity, I'm making the animations and then I'm importing the animations. But it would be cool if I could just animate in the same program that I output my games in. So, and if you're interested in making games, you should totally check out Unity. Unity is fantastic. I think when you first open it, it's overwhelming. Like, kind of like people tell me when you open Adobe Illustrator, it's the same way. I've been using it so long that I can't tell anymore. But Unity is that way. But there are so many great tutorials from Unity on how to use Unity. So I highly suggest checking that out if you want to make video games. And then there are some add-ons, like some plugins that you can download, where certain types of games you don't even need to worry about coding at all. So you can just do everything with drag and drop interfaces, which is really cool. So I've got a little bit more time left. I'll introduce myself one more time for people who are just kind of coming in, because several people, looks like, have joined recently. And so my name is Gaius Augustus. My Instagram handle is Process of Inquiry, where queer is spelled Queer. And I'm a multimedia science communicator. I make infographics, illustrations, animations, and my goal is really to help make science more visual. I think that we can do a much better job communicating science than we're doing. And I think that in addition to what we're already doing, we could do more visual science communication. And so one of my big goals in the future is connecting artists and scientists, connecting artists with science communicators who do writing, and trying to build up a community where we're very much educating and communicating in as many different platforms as possible. I talk about this a lot when I do advocacy work, that there's a lot of different ways to do advocacy, and that we need all of those different ways in order to make change happen. And I think the same is true when we're advocating for better science and better implementation of science into policy. That the more avenues we have to address a certain problem, like climate change, or biodiversity change, or disease, the more avenues we have to educate people through visuals, through games, through writing, through news, through YouTube, through videos, any different ways that we can come up with, through one-on-one outreach, through group activities, any ways that we can all come together and do that we should do. My way is not the only way, and I think that we do ourselves a service if we bring in all of these tools, and we do ourselves a disservice if we choose to only use one or a handful of tools. So, if there are no other questions, I think I am probably going to head out. It is early for me here, and I think I'm going to go back to sleep. But I do want to say, if you are interested in any of my tutorials, blog posts, again, I'm coming out with a blog post tomorrow about tools that I talked about today. That'll be on my website at GaiusJAugustus.com. That's GaiusJAugustus.com. You can also get to it from my Instagram profile, Process of Inquiry. And I'm also really active on Twitter at Gaius Divi-Filius. So feel free to reach out to me and let me know if you have any questions, or if you have some tutorials or blog posts that you would like me to, or topics that you'd like me to cover in the future. You can always find me on my website. There's contact information there. My DMs are open on pretty much, on every platform. I'm happy to talk with you. I also offer one-on-one consulting, tutoring, teaching, whatever you want to call it. So if you're interested in learning more, I can get a lot done in an hour teaching session that can get you pretty far. So I typically start with a free consultation that you can schedule on my website, and then I move from there. So that's to determine what you need, and then we can move on from there. So you can see all of those resources and more on my website. You could also join my membership, which is a free membership that just gets you access to like handouts and freebies, and then sometimes discounts to my workshops and my products. So with that, I'm going to wait a couple more minutes for questions, but I think I've run out of things to talk about. Not that I can't talk more about science art, because I could probably talk all day about it, but I've answered the questions that I get asked most often. I also want to just take a minute to thank the Addictive Brain for having me and inviting me for this Q&A. I hope that you found something I said interesting, and I hope that I answered the immediate questions that you have about making infographics, about learning to draw, and about doing more art in the future. I am a firm believer that you do not have to be a masterpiece artist to create infographics or animations. I definitely think that there is a range of skill levels to creating any kind of science art. Definitely think that some places in science art do need more artistic skill than others, but we all start somewhere. We all start learning and drawing poorly or simply, and we learn to get better over time. And I encourage you that if you're interested in it, just start practicing and then getting feedback, because that's how you learn. People say practice, 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 but you have to get feedback. So the absolute best thing that you can do is to go out there, practice drawing things, and then get feedback from someone who you think is better than you and who you think gives good feedback for you. I'm happy to give that feedback. Again, I offer consultations and services. I'm also happy to chat over DMs. So one other thing I want to mention really quick is that I have a few different things coming up that you can keep an eye out for. One is that I do my From Science to Infographic workshop about once a month. I haven't decided my June date yet, but if you're interested in learning to make infographics, everyone who's taken it has told me that it was just a really, really good workshop with one-on-one attention, and that they got a lot out of it. So if you want to do that or see that or talk to someone who has been a part of it, let me know and I can direct you. But you can get to the but you can look out on my website for that. Also, on June 1st, on Twitter, and hopefully, we'll see, hopefully YouTube as well, I am going to be with another artist. I think her name's Jen, and her name on Twitter, I don't remember her handle, but it's Synaptic Intermission is the name. We're going to be doing a live stream of just drawing and talking, and hopefully we'll have another artist join us, but if not, it'll be us at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, where we will just be, you can watch us draw, and we're going to be choosing a topic and just kind of talking about it. So if you're interested in that, check us out on Twitter, where we'll be there on June 1st. And then the last thing is that I have a free membership as part of my website where you can get access to handouts and worksheets, as well as getting discounts to some things on my site. So if you are interested in making your science more visible, or getting access to those handouts, or just being part of a community that really cares about improving science communication, I really encourage you to go on my site and sign up for my membership, because I think that building that community is really important, and that that's something I want to build out and make much better in the future. So with that, I am going to head out. I want you all to know that you are doing amazing at whatever you are doing, and I look forward to seeing what you create in the future. Thank you again to the Addictive Brain for having me, and again, you can check out my resources, more about me, and my services over at GaiusAugustus.com. Thanks so much, and I hope that I will be talking to many of you soon. Bye.